Welcome to the first video from the Exploring the Little Season video channel. We'll be giving a brief overview of what the little season is and a few of the relevant issues that we will be dealing with. The phrase little season comes from the KJV translation of Revelation 20, verse 3, and it refers to an important time period that has not received much attention by teachers and students of the end times. You may wish to pause this video and carefully read through Revelation chapter 20, since it will help you get a lot more from what you will hear. The phrase little season refers to the period of time just after the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. So just to set the stage, we will now read Revelation 20, verses 1 through 3, King James Version. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, until the 1,000 years should be fulfilled. And after that he must be loosed a little season. The events of Revelation chapter 20 immediately follow the defeat of the rebellious kings of the earth and their armies in chapter 19, along with the demise of the beast and the false prophet, who were cast into the lake of fire. Chapter 20 begins with Satan being bound by a powerful angel and forced into the abyss, sometimes called the bottomless pit. This abyss functions as a spiritual prison where he will be kept for 1,000 years. This 1,000-year period is when the millennial reign of Christ takes place, and Revelation later says that after this period of rulership, God allows Satan to be released into the world to deceive the nations once again. This period is translated in the KJV as a little season, and by most other translations as a short period or a little while. What I will be calling the little season approach to Revelation has some significant differences from the view held by many in the churches. Many evangelical believers think that we are now in a period of time that is leading up to the tribulation, and they believe that soon there will be a rapture that will remove us from earth before the tribulation occurs. After this, there will be a literal millennial reign by Christ and his people on earth. This understanding is called premillennialism or dispensationalism. This is the view promoted by Hal Lindsey and the Left Behind series. Many premillennial believers today believe that the middle chapters of the book of Revelation describe the future tribulation, which is brought to a close in chapter 19 with the return of Christ, at which time Satan is bound and the millennium begins. According to this prevailing premillennial view, all of this is still in the future for us. The little season view is very different and considers that chapters 6 through 19 of Revelation describe judgments that took place in the 1st century AD on the Jewish nation that had rejected its Messiah, as well as the Roman Empire. This view is often called Preterism, and it sees the Olivet Discourse in Matthew 24, Mark 13, and Luke 21, along with Revelation 6 through 19, as describing the judgment of Jerusalem and Rome, rather than a future tribulation that strikes the entire world. In this view, the return of Christ occurred late in the 1st century AD, rather than being an event that we still await in the future. The millennial reign started in the 1st century and ran through the period often called the Middle Ages. After the conclusion of the 1,000-year reign, Satan was released to deceive the nations once more for a little season. The approach that we are discussing sees us as being in the little season today. Revelation is very clear that there is a time period after the 1,000-year reign of Christ and the saints where the devil is given, by the deliberate plan and foreknowledge of God, a release from the abyss, so that he can make good on his desire to go out into the world to deceive the nations and to gather a huge army to make war against the camp of the saints, God's people. This time period is rarely discussed by writers on Revelation, and very few discuss it at any length or in any detail. God willing, we hope to do so in future videos. Our current era is a time of horrific troubles perpetrated by nations and other entities that eagerly follow powerful and unprecedented deceptions instigated by Satan and deceiving spirits working under his control. This scenario represents Satan's last and best attempt to wipe out the church, destroy God's creation, and see as many people as possible end up in hell. Satan's last day's plan is to gather a huge army to march against God's people in a final destructive battle. As Revelation 20 tells us, fire will come down from heaven and destroy the forces fighting against God's people, and the devil will be cast into the lake of fire. After this, there will be a final judgment. This concludes Revelation chapter 20. Understanding this point of view does not come quickly or easily for most people. It certainly did for us. It did not for us, actually, even those who are very familiar with the scriptures. There are a few places where things often seem difficult. We plan to address these in detail in future videos, but we'll touch on some of them here to give you an idea of where we will be going. First, many people who are serious Bible believers have mainly been exposed to premillennial thinking, where everyone's waiting for the rapture and hoping to escape the tribulation. Even if there's never been any real teaching on it, this seems to be in the air, and it is pretty easy to tell that this is by far the majority opinion. Seriously considering a very different outlook can be a little unsettling, and one can easily feel very uncomfortable at the prospect of voicing any other perspective, since dispensationalists who are very strong on belief in the rapture, the tribulation, and so forth, can easily give the strong impression that any other belief must be unscriptural, if not heretical. Looking at the tribulation and the beginning of the millennium as having already occurred is a viewpoint usually held by believers called Preterists. This belief is commonly held in churches from the Reformed or Calvinistic tradition, and it is best known adherents were R.C. Sproul and Hank Hanegraaff. Even though it is a minority position today, theologically, rather than a heresy, the word preterism often invokes very uncomfortable feelings in many Baptist, charismatic, or non-denominational circles, and it can make someone apprehensive to talk about it with others. Second, when considering that the millennial reign may have taken place during the Middle Ages, questions naturally arise about how the timeline works. One idea that is increasingly being put forth by those who are teaching along these lines is that it seems as though the historical timeline that we have been taught has been tampered with in order to hide the real nature of how and when the millennium and little season actually occurred. In particular, two theories have arisen along these lines: that the Roman Empire actually fell around the time late in the 1st century, and that it appears that anything from 700 to 1,000 years may have been added to the historical timeline that we were taught. Even though there are academic scholars who are putting forth strong evidence to support these ideas, such a possibility can seem too close to being a conspiracy theory for some people. Now, we should let you know that conspiracy type thinking is quite common within the community that is discussing this approach, since it differs so markedly from what has been taught in the churches and the wider culture. Looking at things like this can be a real stretch for many people. Now, when somebody first starts looking into something for which there is a conspiracy theory, that theory can seem like there's no way, that is too weird, that could never happen that way. But if you look at things from different perspectives and slowly do some reading, some research, think about it, it's like, well, maybe. And I guess there is another way to look at it. Often a person can completely come around to a view that they would have quickly dismissed just a short time earlier. This is what often happens when looking at the little season and all the issues surrounded by it. It can look like totally out there, like there's no way. But if you really take your time and be patient and look at stuff from different perspectives, you'd be surprised at what starts making sense. And we ourselves have gone through this process ourselves. Third, those of us on this path are comfortable with the idea that both the Olivet Discourse and roughly the first 80% of the book of Revelation deal primarily with the local situation in the first century Middle East and the Mediterranean basin, rather than primarily dealing with events that are still in the future for us. This understanding is often associated with the preterist approach, but we would stress that learning about this outlook on the Bible is not about learning a system of interpretation or doctrine. The little season approach to last days questions is actually a fairly new development that has arisen in the wider culture, church culture, within the past few years. And while we would say that while preterist writers have helped us, we draw from many writers and teachers from a variety of outlooks in our attempts to find the best interpretation of the various passages that we're dealing with. This entire conversation is very much a work in progress. It's not about learning a bunch of answers or opinions, nor is it a substitute for doing one's own homework. We are serving as a resource, and all of us who are studying this area are learning all the time. All of us who are making videos or writing along these lines are pretty sure that we are in the little season and that the millennial reign has already taken place. But we'd all admit that there is a lot of unknown territory to be explored. Some of the other biblical areas that we hope to deal with include the millennium, the resurrection, the afterlife, the nature and extent of deception in this season, and some recommended resources. There are many questions that we can't give firm answers to at this point. There are several related issues under discussion and a number of places where we can't easily tag with a passage from the Bible, much as we'd like to. Preterism as a school of thought has helped us answer some important questions, but many of us would be uncomfortable being labeled as preterists or anything else. We are researchers and investigators rather than people who are teaching a system. We come from a Bible teaching background, so we'll try to look into the biblical issues as much as we can. But we will also admit that we don't have an easy biblical answer to all the questions that arise. That is the nature of a movement in its early stages, like this one. This is a space where you can come to learn, and we will try to provide helpful content, but you've got to be prepared to ask your own questions and develop your own opinions. We will try to give you a lot of food for thought, but we're not going to tell you what or how to think. We will try to provide an environment for learning about the little season and some of the related issues that we think are important. We'd love to have you along as we pursue answers together. Thanks for watching this video. We plan to release more soon. We hope that you'll want to like, subscribe, and share. God bless.